pain, every breath felt like a knife cutting through me. I tried to stand up, but the wound on my ribcage made it impossible to breathe steadily. We stood facing each other, me and Vanessa. Her eyes were full of hatred, but I no longer feared. Her mom stood beside us, but she didn't look at me. Her gaze seemed to say I wasn't even there, as if only Vanessa, the favored daughter, the one I spent my whole life protecting, mattered. "Don't call the cops," Mom said softly yet decisively. "It will ruin her life." Those words hit me like a punch to the heart. I was the child Mom always pushed out of her life. Vanessa was never blamed, while I, the one who had always been abandoned, was the one who had to bear all the guilt. The pain wasn't just physical, but the indifference from my mother, her choice. She had chosen her, the daughter she always protected, even when she broke my bones. That day wasn't just a family fight. It was the moment that marked my awakening. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. As Vanessa's shadow, as a child my mother saw as a burden, my decision was born in that pain. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories. I was born into a family where love was a luxury. My parents divorced when I was too young, and from then on, my mother was the only one who took care of me and Vanessa. She always thought she did her best, but throughout those years, I never felt the care and protection that a child needs. Instead, I was the one who had to bear all the anger, hatred, and abuse from every direction. Vanessa was the beloved child, the one who was always cared for and adored. She was the center of attention in the family. Every step she took, every achievement of hers was praised by Mom, even cherished. Meanwhile, I, the other child, was nothing more than a shadow, always standing behind, waiting for a little attention. But it never came. Mom could sit up all night listening to Vanessa talk about her dreams and stories, but she never took the time to listen to me, not even once from a young age. I always tried to do everything to attract Mom's attention. I excelled in school. I tried to take care of the house, and I helped her with work, but all Mom saw were my flaws. Nothing I did was ever good enough, and every time I made a mistake, she would scold me, even blame me for the problems in the family. Vanessa wasn't just the one Mom loved. She was also the one who always found ways to torment me. She used Mom's favor to bully me. Every time Mom wasn't around, she would hit me, criticize me, and force me to do tasks that weren't mine. I tried to endure because I thought it was the only way to keep Mom's affection, but things only got worse. That day, I couldn't take it anymore. Vanessa, in a fit of rage, attacked me brutally. I didn't know what I had done wrong, but she kept hitting me and yelling at me. When I couldn't stand anymore, she slapped me hard across the face, sending me crashing to the floor. The pain in my rib was unbearable, and I couldn't breathe. The pain felt like it was tearing my body apart. When Mom walked into the room, she just looked at me coldly. She didn't rush over to help me up. There was no sign of concern or sympathy. She just stood there, sighed, and looked at me. "Don't call the cops. It will ruin her life," she said, pointing at me with indifference as if I didn't exist. Those words shattered my heart. I had once hoped for my mother's love, but now I realized that, in her eyes, I was nothing more than an invisible child. Vanessa could do anything to me, as long as she wasn't hurt. And me? I was the one who always had to endure, always had to stay silent. I couldn't live in such a family anymore. After Vanessa's attack and my mother's indifference, I decided that everything had to change. I could no longer be an outsider in my own life. This indifference and family violence had gone on long enough. That night, when everyone else was asleep, I sat alone in my room, thinking about everything. I was no longer that little girl. I had grown up, and I deserved a better life. I couldn't keep being the victim in this story if for all this time I had been silent. I endured and waited for change, but no one in my family understood my pain. Now I knew that I had to stand up and take back the right to live for myself. From that moment, I began to make plans. I didn't want revenge out of anger, but to protect myself and let the truth come to light. I needed evidence. I had to expose the truth. The next step for me was to gather all the proof of what had happened over the years. The abuse, the deceit, and my mother's indifference. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted to take control of my life, and to do that, I had to prove to Vanessa, my mother, and everyone around me that I would no longer be the one who was abandoned forever. The next chapter will be the first step in carrying out my plan, collecting evidence and preparing for decisive actions. From victim to the one who takes control. Since that night, when I decided I couldn't continue living under the shadow of my family, everything changed. I was no longer the weak daughter, always waiting for attention and love from my mother. I began a journey, not just for revenge, but to recreate myself and reclaim the power I had lost. I couldn't do anything without evidence. Everything in my family had been covered up, but I knew there was a truth hidden beneath those masks. Vanessa had always lived in favoritism and protection from my mother. She could do anything, and Mom would always defend her. But I wasn't the only one in the family enduring this abuse. The scars I carried were marks of a painful past, and I couldn't keep living in that pain. I started recording everything, every conversation, every irresponsible thing my mother said. Every time Vanessa tormented me, I wrote it all down. I bought a small recorder, cheap phones no one would notice, and took pictures of the wounds I had to endure. But I didn't stop there. I made the decision to expose every lie in this family. One of the things that hurt me the most was the deceit my mother had applied to me over the years. She always said that my grandfather had left the rental agreement under her name. But I didn't believe that. She always found ways to hide everything. I decided to dig into the documents she never wanted me to see. One day, I accidentally discovered an old drawer of my mother's. It was where she hid important documents, including the rental agreement my grandfather had left for me years ago. She had lied to me, saying the agreement was lost. But I knew that my grandfather had left the contract under my name, something my mother never wanted me to know. That was the reason she had always tried to take the house I had rightful ownership of for so long. I didn't just want to solve my family's issues. I wanted to show everyone the truth. I knew Vanessa had big dreams. She wanted to work in the publishing industry, and I also knew that to achieve that, she had to pass interviews at prestigious companies. She had been falsifying her resume, inflating her experience and skills that she didn't even have. I decided to use this opportunity. I had gathered enough evidence of her fraudulent actions in her resume. I found copies of the fake documents Vanessa had created, and I knew this was the best chance to expose the truth. Even though I had to face fear and anxiety, I knew I couldn't miss this opportunity to do this. I had to send all the documents I had collected to the Human Resources Department of the publishing company Vanessa was interviewing with. To do this, I had to act secretly. I couldn't let my mother or Vanessa know what I was doing. I worked carefully, ensuring everything was done accurately and discreetly. After preparing all the evidence and documents, I sent them to the Human Resources Department of the publishing company that Vanessa was trying to join. I didn't just want to put her in an awkward situation. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. When I hit the send button, I felt a wave of emotion rise within me. This was the first step in my revenge plan, but it was also the first step in achieving justice and reclaiming what was mine. That my plan is starting to bear fruit. After sending the email to the HR department, I felt a sense of relief. However, I knew that revenge wasn't just about making Vanessa lose her job. I needed to make everyone involved in my family pay the price. The indifference and abandonment I had endured couldn't be easily forgiven. But how would I continue with my plan? The answer will gradually unfold in the next chapter, when I decide to use the very property my grandfather left me to regain ownership of the house my mother had deceived me about for all these years. As I prepared for the next step, I also realized that every action I took had to be carefully calculated, because not only Vanessa, but my mother also had to be held accountable for what had happened in this family, and my revenge wouldn't stop at destroying her career. Destroying a career and reclaiming my property. When I pressed the send button on that email, I no longer felt anxious. A part of me, though full of insecurity and fear about the consequences, also felt an indescribable sense of relief. The lies, the hits, the indifference from my mother, and the pain I had endured from Vanessa, it all seemed to culminate in one single strike. My revenge had begun, and everything was now in my hands. Vanessa, the beginning of her downfall. Things happened quickly. Just a few days after sending the email, I received a call from the HR department of the publishing company, where Vanessa had been interviewing. They asked me about the authenticity of the documents I had provided and the fraud in Vanessa's job application. They said they had verified everything and would no longer be moving forward with her hiring. At first, I felt a slight sense of relief, but soon after, the full truth began to surface. Vanessa wasn't just losing this job. She would be blacklisted from publishing companies. The rumors would spread, and the career she had dreamed of was now in ruins. I didn't need to do anything else. She had dug her own grave with lies and fraudulent actions. But her career wasn't my ultimate goal. Reclaiming the house, I still clearly remember the words my mother said that day, when she claimed the rental agreement my grandfather had left behind was lost. At the time, I hadn't fully understood the lies behind those words. Our family had always lived in that house, and although I knew my grandfather had left the property to me, I never thought I would have to confront my mother to reclaim ownership. But things had changed now. I had decided that I wouldn't let my mother continue to take the house, as she had done with me for all those years. I went back through the documents in my mother's drawer, and everything became clear. The house, the rental agreement my grandfather had left, all belonged to me. With the help of a lawyer, I began the legal process to reclaim ownership of the house. My mother had no idea about my plan. Everything moved quickly and smoothly. Once all the paperwork and evidence were submitted to the court, I knew I held undeniable power in my hands. The day of reckoning. When Mom had to leave, that day came sooner than I expected. Neither my mother nor Vanessa knew about the legal steps I had already taken. When I sent them the official notice that the house had been transferred and they needed to vacate, both of them were stunned. My mother, in denial and anger, couldn't accept the truth. She tried to argue that I had no right to do this, that I shouldn't destroy the family, but I felt nothing anymore. To me, this family was no longer a home. It had been a place where I suffered, was abandoned, and oppressed. When my mother and Vanessa moved out, I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't feel victorious. But I did feel freedom, peace within myself. The sense of control and standing firm in my life was, at last, the thing I had always longed for. Moving into a new space, renovating the house, after my mother and Vanessa moved out. The house was no longer a place filled with pain. That was when I started rebuilding my life from scratch. I began renovating the house, a place I had always felt trapped in. Vanessa's old room, where she used to dominate, became my art studio. This was where I would start living for myself, pursuing the passions I had always hidden away. The house transformed into a creative space, a place where I could be free, where I could paint, write, and build a future I had never even imagined. I no longer had to live in Vanessa's shadow or endure the hurt from my mother. I was the one in control of this space, and I was the one in control of my life. From art to academia, the next step in my journey, as I renovated the house, I also thought about the next step in my life, although I had previously turned down the opportunity to attend college because of family and personal issues. Now that everything had changed, I realized I had a chance to continue the education I had missed. I decided to apply for scholarships and received an offer from a prestigious university. This was my opportunity to pursue the art I had forgotten about for so long. But it didn't stop with art. I also started taking freelance work for companies Vanessa once dreamed of joining. I worked not to get back at her, but to prove that I could do everything on my own without relying on my family or anyone's favoritism. My life has completely changed now. I've not only reclaimed the house I lost, but I've also found my own path to freedom and success. The steps I take from here will no longer just be about revenge, but about rebuilding myself and creating a new future. But I haven't forgotten those who hurt me. While I no longer seek revenge in everything, I know that the truth will eventually come to light, and the price they'll pay won't end with losing the house. This journey, though sometimes painful, will ultimately lead me to complete freedom. In the next chapter, I will reach the pinnacle of both revenge and personal revival when I graduate, stand on stage, wear my grandmother's necklace, and feel the strength that has brought me to this day. The perfect revenge and freedom the day of my graduation. I stood there not as the weak girl who had been abandoned by her family, but as a strong, independent, and free woman. Every step I had taken, every decision I had made along this journey, had led me to this important moment. The memories of abuse, the harsh words, and my mother's indifference all faded into the background, replaced by a future I had built for myself. The graduation ceremony, the necklace and a promise to myself. Graduation wasn't just a milestone in my academic career. It was the day I closed one chapter of my life, where I was a victim of neglect and abuse, and opened a new one, where I became the one in charge of my own life. I no longer felt pain or lacked out as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. I felt as if I had truly won, standing there, in front of the crowd. I saw my grandmother's necklace gleaming on my neck. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of resilience and sacrifice. She was the only one in my family who had always believed in me and loved me. That necklace reminded me of everything I had been through, and everything I had achieved. In that moment of receiving my diploma, I couldn't help but think of everything I had overcome. I looked back at the crowd, searching for the faces of my mother and Vanessa, but they weren't there. Mom didn't show up, and neither did Vanessa. That didn't make me feel sad. In fact, it made me feel a sense of relief. I no longer needed them in my life. My life was mine, and I would continue to live it the way I chose, unaffected by anyone else. The transformation from victim to victorious. Not long after receiving my scholarship and graduating, I began my career. I didn't just study art, I also started working on creative projects, freelancing for big companies. The same places Vanessa had once dreamed of, but never made it into. The art projects I worked on were achievements I could truly be proud of. I wasn't just carving out a career for myself. I was rebuilding myself day by day, step by step. Vanessa had no idea I had these opportunities. She never knew that she had effectively ended her own career. But to me, that didn't matter anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, except myself. My entire family had never believed in me, but I had proven that I could succeed without them. Mom and Vanessa, ghosts of the past. After my family was torn apart, I no longer kept in touch with my mother or Vanessa. I changed my address, my phone number, and never looked back. My mom was no longer the person I sought love from. I didn't need her. Vanessa, even though she was my sister, no longer had any place in my life. She was the one who had made me suffer, and I could never accept her indifference towards me. I knew they couldn't change. They would continue to live in their own world, always finding ways to blame me and do things their way. But I wasn't theirs anymore. I didn't need them to understand me. I only needed to understand myself and accept that this life was mine. Revenge isn't just destruction. It's rebuilding yourself throughout this journey. I learned that revenge isn't about violence or hurting others. True revenge is freedom. It's not letting anyone or anything control or devalue you. The revenge I sought wasn't to hurt Vanessa or my mom, but to prove that I could rebuild my life without them. I took revenge by reclaiming my power and my freedom. I took revenge by living the life I wanted, no longer bound by the false beliefs about my worth. I took revenge by building a successful career, a happy and free life, without needing help or approval from those who had abandoned me. The end, complete freedom and recovery. Finally, I was completely free. I lived in the house I had reclaimed, where I could create and find joy in every day. I was no longer the oppressed person controlled by my family. I had rebuilt myself from the broken pieces, and now I was the one in charge of my own life. At my graduation ceremony, wearing my grandmother's necklace and receiving my diploma, I made a promise to myself that I would never return to the old path. I would never let anyone at all, make me feel undeserving of love and respect. I would always be myself and live the life I had chosen. Mom and Vanessa could live their lives, but I had found my own path, and that was all I needed. The perspective of the supporting character, the mother who stood there, watching my daughter. It wasn't worry I felt, nor was it pain seeing her hurt. It was indifference. A part of me knew I should run over and help her, but another part told me to stay firm. Vanessa wasn't the perfect daughter, but she was the only one I could trust. As for her, the daughter who always seemed to sabotage everything in this family. She would never be the one to make me proud. "Don't call the cops, it will ruin her life," I said softly but with determination, hoping my daughter would understand. I didn't want to complicate things further, and I didn't want to ruin Vanessa's future. She was in an important interview, and I couldn't let her lose that opportunity. Things would be better if my older daughter understood and didn't let everything spiral out of control. Silent Penny didn't know what to do. My heart felt broken, but I couldn't reach out to piece it back together. My daughter, she had always been the shadow in this family, in my eyes and Vanessa's. Even though I could see she always tried to please me, I couldn't feel that love for her. I used to love her, I know that. But after years of disappointment and poor choices, I seemed to have forgotten about her. Forgotten that I had another daughter besides Vanessa. She was always the weak one, always the one left behind in this family. Vanessa, the one who made me proud, the one with achievements, a career, and the only one who helped me escape the loneliness of life. A painful reminder when I saw my daughter lying on the floor, the pain from Vanessa's hit still showing on her face. I knew what I had to do, but in my eyes at that moment, I couldn't just look at her and offer comfort. I couldn't go close and hug her like every other mother would. I thought about all the times I had ignored family events, about how I had let Vanessa take my heart so easily. Vanessa had once been the daughter I was proud of. She was always capable, always making me proud with her achievements. But when Vanessa and my younger daughter, the one who had always been overlooked in the family, clashed, I couldn't let things go further. I couldn't lose Vanessa. She was my future, the daughter I had given all my love to. As for her, my daughter, she would just have to endure, as she always had before. And I couldn't allow my daughter to ruin everything. Justifying my reasons, tears that had passed, the mistakes I made in raising both of my children, the failures in loving my kids, had made me believe that only Vanessa could bring me joy and pride. I had spent too much time focusing on her dreams, forgetting that my older daughter also needed love. But instead of listening, I had let her be overshadowed by Vanessa. Maybe I was wrong, but I couldn't turn back. When I looked into my daughter's eyes, I saw the hatred, the despair that I had left in her life. But once again, I couldn't do anything. Every decision had already been manipulated by Vanessa and this family. When everything was exposed honestly, I didn't want to see my daughter become that strong. I didn't want her to stand up and take control of her life, because I was afraid. I was afraid that if she did, all the excuses I had made for myself, that I couldn't help, that I couldn't love her, would be shattered. That feeling was unbearable, and I chose to protect Vanessa because I knew that once the truth was exposed, no one in this family would ever be able to heal. The end of everything. When my daughter finally regained ownership of her house, I didn't feel happiness or regret. I had done wrong, but I couldn't change the past. My entire family had lost what I once thought was important. Everything had fallen apart, and I couldn't fix it. But a part of me still hoped that someday my daughter would understand and forgive me. However, I also knew that forgiveness couldn't come easily with such deep wounds. And no matter what, I knew that, in the end, I had lost everything that mattered most in my life. Conclusion and life lesson: life doesn't always go the way we expect it to. Sometimes we have to go through pain, betrayal, and deep wounds to find the true strength within ourselves. That's the lesson I've learned from everything that has happened to me and my family. I used to be a victim of my own family. I was the forgotten child left behind, living in the shadow of an older sister who was loved and protected. I endured the hits, the lies, the indifference, and the abuse for years without being able to do anything. My mom never stood by me. Instead, she always found ways to protect Vanessa, the daughter she considered perfect. But that indifference pushed me to make a decision to do something, to change my life. And that's when I realized that strength doesn't come from enduring forever, but from knowing how to stand up, love myself, and protect my own well-being. When I decided to fight against my family, I wasn't just seeking revenge. I realized that revenge isn't about hitting back, but about rebuilding myself. I reclaimed ownership of my house, but more importantly, I reclaimed myself, my self-respect, and belief in my own worth. No one could control me anymore. I took charge of my life. My story isn't one of winning a battle. It's the story of someone who dared to face pain, dared to face betrayal, and dared to change, to live for myself. What I went through wasn't easy, but I'm no longer that weak, suffering girl. I've become a strong woman who dares to stand up, who dares to act for her own future. But I also realize that the past cannot be changed. Old wounds can't be healed overnight, but I can choose not to let them dominate my life. I've learned that forgiveness isn't always an act of mercy, but sometimes an act of liberation. Forgiving others isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about freeing myself from anger and resentment. And that's a necessary step for me to move forward and build a new future. A future no longer ruled by toxic relationships. With everything I've been through, I've learned that no one but ourselves can determine our fate. Strength doesn't come from never falling, but from daring to rise after every fall. This story isn't just mine. It's for everyone who has endured, who has been forgotten and suffered in this life. If you've ever felt like a victim of toxic relationships, remember you are not alone. You can change your life. Don't let the past control you. Don't let the indifference and betrayal of others strip away your self-worth. Stand up, love, and protect yourself. Choose to live for yourself, because it's your right. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone you think needs to hear this. They may be facing a battle like I once did, and a reminder of their own strength might help them find the light in the darkness.